I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So the way the Dutch search team tracked Jay's scent was from the Airbnb to the ping point to the fall point, and that is precisely how it made sense to search for Jay, with dogs, using his scent as far as one could follow it, right? It's difficult to say why the first tracking teams failed, that's in terms of the Spanish authorities, or whether Signi Zoekhonden succeeded, because it's always easy to find something in hindsight when you already know where the finish line is. One thing that's astonishing is that Jay's scent was apparently still in the area almost 30 days later. According to the Mail Online, Esther van Neerbos, a vet who led the volunteer search group, said the team with the dogs picked up Jay's tracks at the Airbnb he had left and in the valley where the last phone ping was, just before the phone ran empty. By noon, the dogs were rested to avoid the high temperatures. During that break, the message came in that a body had been found where was still unclear. The team's dog called fast and then managed to find the spot where Jay's body had been airlifted from. Now, this is quite extraordinary. If I'm reading it right, firstly, the fact that the dog actually reached the exact spot in the ravine, and secondly, that the Spanish basically seemed to find Jay mere hours before the Dutch team. Nothing like a bit of competitive rivalry to get you going. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the thousands of you who have subscribed over the last week or two. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So they then changed their goal. The search team, now that Jay had been found, they changed their goal to now capture Jay's route as far as possible so that the family could get more clarity on the final journey. Now, what is important to note from the tracked route is just how directly Jay seems to be moving towards the sea, right? If you look at how the dogs tracked his route, it's almost a straight line from that ping point to the nearest point of the sea. And that is what we said from the beginning, was that he was likely trying to get to the sea. According to the article, the next day, a second dog, Signi's Royce, brought the search team to the helicopter site again. On the third day of the search, the third dog, Signi's Flex, managed to penetrate to the scene of the accident. So it seemed like it took 3 days to actually get to the point at the bottom of the ravine. And this apparently took 2.5 hours. They say a heavy hike of 2.5 hours was covered through rocky terrain with lots of weeds, bushes, and cacti. Now, this 2.5-hour hike to Jay's location suggests that Jay was walking for 2.5 hours himself, maybe slightly less, maybe slightly more, and that he may have fallen around 11 o'clock, somewhere between 11 o'clock and noon. By then, if he was thirsty at 9 a.m., when he last spoke to Lucy, one can imagine the desperate state he was in almost 2 hours later. And let's face it, going downhill for a long time does start to make the knees wobbly. It's not only downhill, but it's downhill over uneven terrain. Think about going down steps for 2 hours, what state your knees would be in at the end of that. Add to that the fact that he did the walk he did from the Airbnb, it was kind of an uphill walk, plus 3 successive nights of raving and dancing. Well, his legs had to have gotten quite spongy and tired, and this is besides likely feeling dizzy and sleepy and dehydrated at this point. Now, according to the article, a drone was then used to capture where Jay's body was eventually found after he fell. Now, I've looked at that drone footage. To me, it's not particularly clear. As a journalist, I would really like to see a circled area or an arrow. I still think The mapping that has been done by the media is shockingly bad. People don't seem to know how to read maps or how to annotate them. We had the same thing in the Kylie Rodney case. Even when you know where something is, you can't seem to show it on a map. Signi Zoekhonden's statement said that at the moment, Flex clearly smashed the final destination. Not I think, the best terminology there, but basically, Flex found this apparently final resting place, and the area and the road to it were checked by the drone. That's the national drone team. So it seems like there was an additional resource that was in place to assist Signi Zoekhonden. She went on to say the steep descent down was spared for the team because the drone captured the endpoint 20 meters away from them. Now, from this description, it sounds to me like the search team didn't actually access the point at the bottom of the ravine where Jay's body was found. Looking on Google Earth, if one follows the ridgeline from the ping point to the coast, one can clearly see how Jay is moving towards a trap. The further he goes, the further he penetrates an area that is just a tumble of cliffs and ravines, and the only way out of there is to reverse and go all the way back. This is abundantly clear when you look at it on Google Maps. Of course, he didn't have that luxury. At the point where he needs to go back, he's so close to the sea, he can likely not just see it, but hear it and smell it. He's so close, but the section in front of him is simply not passable. An older, more mature individual may have done this, may have turned around, but his impatience, the impatience of this 19-year-old, his stubborn persistence, and let's even call it the optimism of youth, caused him to insist, and so he continued over virtually impassable terrain until he fell. The article goes on to note the search team immediately started their return journey to be able to endure the worst heat as short as possible. The drone footage and the final coordinates were shown to the family in the evening in what was an emotional moment. In their description, they go on to say the dog Flex indicated a particular spot in the ravine which he described as difficult and dangerous. Well, we've been saying that all along. Again, it's not clear if they got right down to the ravine floor, right inside that thick vegetation, which we saw from the Spanish authorities. Remember, the Spanish authorities actually had someone airlifted down, using a helicopter down to that area. The Perilous ravine has extremely steep cliffs on both sides and goes from 20 meters to 100 meters wide in certain areas. So, in certain parts, the ravine is obviously very narrow. Esther said that Jay would not have been able to get to the sea from where he was. And so the media say that, there were claims that he could get to the sea from there. Well, he could if he was in the adjacent ravine, if he was in the Muska Gorge. Right, this is the gorge just north of the Muska Gorge. If he was in the Muska Gorge, he could have just followed a path to the sea. Unfortunately, the ravine that he chose simply had no paths, no access from where he was to the sea. And so what was facing him were just a tumble of huge cliffs that are nearly impossible to pass unless you're a rock climber. Of course, Jay didn't know this. And it's also somewhat counterintuitive to imagine that the closer you get to the sea, the steeper the terrain gets. And I must say, from a distance, when you look at the terrain from the road, it looks like it's fairly a gentle, undulating, gradual descent. Of course, as you get further and further, it gets steeper and steeper. There are obviously sheer cliff drops into the sea that does occur, such as on the Algarve coast near Cape St. Vincent. I've driven along there. Also, England's White Cliffs of Dover. I've driven along there. Also, Australia's 12 Apostles. I've not actually been there, but I've been quite near to there. Well, in my experience, cliffs plunging directly into the sea are actually quite rare. Often it's the opposite. Beaches and rolling hills tend to be a lot more common. The closer you get to the coast, the more undulating the topography often becomes. Unfortunately, in this instance, unfortunately for Jay, that wasn't the case here. Esther added that she had urged the family not to lay flowers in the exact spot where Jay was found, as it is too dangerous to get to. Signi Zoekhonden shared footage on Facebook. You've seen some of them here. We'll also put a link to that in the description, including around 40 photos showing the area where Jay fell. It was around 300 yards into the ravine. Again, the veterinarian Esther van Neerbos, who led the group, said that the spot where Jay fell was difficult and dangerous. So she obviously, this person who led this search, also understood that Jay had fallen, right? That's her understanding. Now, in terms of the foul play theory, Jay's murderer would have had to park a car, hike 2.5 hours, find Jay or drag Jay to the ravine, push him off, then hike back another 2.5 hours, and then drive off without being seen by searchers including Lucy, who were already in the area within about 2 hours. That's at least 5 hours spent committing a crime, despite being in line of sight from above for at least half of the time. It's also 5 hours of leaving his easy identifiable car in an obvious place, giving away not only Jay's position, but his own position in lieu of Jay's position, and then, of course, his identity as well. Does that make sense? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.